it said that a city belongs to the citizens, not to the people that own the land. And in that map, changed the way we think about cities forever. You see, the pageantry of the marketplace is what breathes life into every town. And it doesn't matter whether it's commodities being sold, or festivals, or gathering of people demonstrating for political reasons, or even a fair that's set up in a farmer's paddock. The idea is every community has a chance to build a place that becomes a center where all of the citizenry knows that it can come together. And look at this. Something as simple as Rockefeller Center, focused for one day out of the year, all the cameras in North America focus on the illumination of that Christmas tree. Pageants are the way a civilization teaches its children, its visitors, even its enemies, about its value system. And even imagine this, a small town of 80,000 people in Tuscany that for 363 days of the year, its market square looks like this. But for 2 days out of the year, the town square doubles in population, and Siena hosts a palio race, a 90-second race that's been going on for 800 years. So we ask in every community where we go, what is it that we can do today, like the citizens of Siena did 800 years ago, to breathe the pageantry of civic life back into a community? A little bit more of history, and then we'll get into the good stuff. These are paintings from the school of Piero della Francesca of the Renaissance. The first one is a baptistry, celebrating the church's domination of a society in a small town. The second painting is a painting of the dueling powers of the military, the imperial aspects of government, as well as the church itself. But the one that interests me most is the third of these paintings. The painting that shows, in fact, the market square opening up onto the harbor, where the public space is what dominates the community. This is what we're talking about for Titanic Quarter. This is where our story begins. We talk a lot about benchmarking waterfronts around the world, and it doesn't matter whether you're looking at Saint-Tropez or Monte Carlo, or the likes of even some of the new waterfronts. For instance, this is what we're talking about in developing in Miami along the water edge. But the idea is to make sure that the waterfront always belongs to the citizens of the community. The promenade of Island Gardens in Miami that will start construction next month is dedicating a 100-foot wide promenade along the entire waterfront looking out on the city of Miami. In Sydney, when we were called in to do Cockle Bay Wharf next to Darling Park on Darling Harbor, the same idea was to restore the waterfront as the dominion of the citizens of the city, not the private ownership of exclusive residents that can afford deluxe apartments. And today, Darling Park, down on Cockle Bay, shows an incredible collection of office, residential, restaurants, cultural facilities. And at the heart of it is a basic idea, like the Noli map of Rome. The entire ground plane of Darling Park, 100,000 square feet, set aside for the citizens of Sydney, not for the residents, not for the tenants, not for the owners of the building, but all who would live and work and visit Sydney. Lobby spaces that were designed as 6-star hotel lobbies, meeting room spaces and meeting halls that are designed now as business parlors, and on the ceiling of that great space, the constellations of the Southern Hemisphere painted with Aboriginal and Australian myths and legends. All those buildings surround the public park, in fact the largest corporately paid for public park anywhere in Australia. And today that park is mobbed at lunchtime. Cockle Bay Wharf at night brought on 5,000 seats for dining, all at once. They said we were crazy. Well, in fact, we couldn't even have any market research that supported it. But it dramatically changed a simple idea. Not that it was great to go to Cockle Bay Wharf, but that it was safe for families to come back into Sydney and enjoy a day out with their family, friends, or groups of colleagues. But you have something quite special here. These astonishing icons of the Samson and Goliath cranes are not just icons for Belfast or Northern Ireland or Great Britain. They're international icons. They represent a gateway, the way Belfast served the world, to create an incredible lineage of shipbuilding stretching back almost 2 centuries. And as you look at the evolution of Belfast through the historic maps and how the community has come up as a place, and particularly the harbor itself and the harbor commissioner's management of the port is truly one of the real success stories of an interaction between public and private development and ownership. When we began to do research here, the first thing we did was we drove around to the seaside communities around Belfast. We began to look at all the places where for the past 25 years, nearly a quarter of your population has moved out. Because in order to lure even 10% of those folks back, we knew we had to recreate the type of lifestyle that they discovered living in these small communities. You'll see in the evolution of the master plan ideas, the one thing that stands out is a village green in the center of each one of the new villages we're talking about. And this matrix, which I'm sure is incomprehensible up on the screen, shows that each village, in fact, was given a separate name and a separate recipe to mix the diversity of housing, office, residential. And when we put it all together, stage 1, as Mike talked about, Abercorn Basin is currently underway. The Odyssey sits here. The new residential blocks designed by John Rose being developed here. The office building is currently scheduled for construction beginning in the first of next year. And the master plan, the framework plan that Turley Associates put together, we built upon that to create not only phase 1, but the extension of phase 2, which includes the Titanic docks. If you take an aerial photograph of that, do a bit of a watercolor wash, you begin to see a little bit how that turns out. This is the Lagan River, of course, going out to the bay. But part of the study included trying to capture a bit of the legacy of what makes Belfast so unique. There is a landscape legacy to Northern Ireland that is extraordinary. It's not just the small little ports that matter, it's this rich green emerald isle that all of you are part of. And we knew that from the very first moment that if we didn't create a collection of parks and gardens, squares and greens, that we would miss an opportunity to restore the character of this genius of the landscape back into the heart of Belfast. Places where people of all different age and all different nationality and all different persuasions and faith can gather and share a common space. And it's not just the paths and the places, it's also about the backyards and the courtyards. We've got to create a place where people can live and know that their kids can play safely while we're inviting the rest of the world to come to the doorstep. And those of you that know Clifton Park in St. John's Wood, the spectacular collection of residential buildings with private gated courtyards and garden yards in back is precisely what we want to create at Titanic Quarter. These intimate gardens are what can allow residents to feel comfortable living here, children to feel safe playing, while we invite the world to come and visit Belfast and spend time in Titanic Quarter. And the parks and gardens, the way we've talked about, snake throughout the entire development. If you look at this top-down view of stage 2 and stage 1 together, this is Abercorn Basin, the Lagan River, you can begin to see the parks and gardens dotting the master plan as it's begun to evolve, so that each of these districts become safe enclaves where children can play, as well as provide exterior public park space where citizens around the world can come and spend time with each other. An example of one of the small courtyards. One of the things that we've talked about is how over the past 100 years, planning has changed. 100 years ago, Ebenezer Howard published a book called Garden Cities of Tomorrow, a staggering book. And in it was a dimension of 500 yards. Well, today we say 500 meters. What he said was that an individual walking 500 meters should be able to get food and transport and access to gardens and everything else. But of course then, the average age of people was 50 years before they died. Things have changed a little bit in a century. Today we know that if you mix 2 people walking together, You know what it's like trying to go out and do something with your spouse or your friend, right? Things slow down a little bit, and in that 5-minute walk, it drops to 350 to 400 meters. If you add a child into that mix, it drops down to 250 meters in a 5-minute walk. And a grandparent with a cane, it's even slower. So we've changed the dimension now in design neighborhoods. 250 meters before you get fresh food, fresh news, fresh flowers, access to transport. And nobody in Titanic Quarter will be more than 250 meters, 2 blocks, away from either garden or waterfront. It is the most monumental change in planning philosophy that's happened. We were doing this work when we were working on Eastern Quarry in Kent. Here, an abandoned set of chalk quarries next to Blue Water is being developed to include 10,000 new homes on the Eurostar line that connects London to Paris, and Ebbsfleet City sits here. But each of those communities is developed like a collection of small villages. But what drove most of Ebbsfleet Valley, and what's now we're working with in Titanic Quarter, is an idea about a non-commercial aspect of life, education. Look at this. 120 years ago, the average age of death was 40 years, okay? People were lucky if they went to school till they were 12, okay, education. Leisure, lucky if one day out of the week for leisure, and basically they worked until they dropped dead. Today, we know that our children will enjoy a lifespan of 80 years. School now is to 20. Leisure has grown to be 4 times a proportionate part of our lives. And our children are the first generation that will have the opportunity of not one 20-year career of work, or 2, but possibly 3. And the only thing that sustains that is lifelong learning. Education is the hallmark of what Titanic Quarter is targeting. Currently, right now, Titanic Quarter, in concert with the Harbor Commissioners, has a petition in front of the Belfast Institute for Further Education to move their building to Titanic Quarter. Instead of building classrooms, we want to build a campus. Instead of building space, we want to build an experience. Instead of building a single tall building in the center of Belfast, we want to build something that integrates with a new residential community and drives education as the forefront of the new economy and the new jobs. Of course, there'll be a diversity of ideas of waterfront living. They'll borrow from formality and eccentricity, which is so much a hallmark of English residential architecture. And the Lagan Village, as it's now been talked about, will include Abercorn Basin, the new residential along the promenade of the Lagan River, the Titanic Signature Experience that Michael Cunahan is leading for City Council, as well as the Harbor Commissioners and Harcourt, and a space here for Belfast Institute for Further Education. The residential will combine a mixture of terraces and balconies that will animate the facades. Where we want to offer a difference, we believe that people should be able to sit outside their facades and look. Residential parks tucked behind, village greens that are slipped in, and a collection of promenades along the waterfront that will showcase, in fact, what it's like to walk along the Lagan River with a boardwalk overlooking the water's edge. When you put all this together, Stage 2 by itself has upwards of 2,000 new homes coming online. And if we look a little closer at it in this composite computer view, you begin to see how all the pieces work together. The promenade will be dedicated as a public right-of-way, landscaped, places for tall ships to moor and anchor, and be an extension of the Belfast maritime experience that we're working on with Michael Cunahan's team on the Titanic Signature offer. The old drawing offices where we sit now will be refreshed and open to create a centerpiece not only for the Titanic, but also the incredible 200-year history of Belfast's relationship with the sea. It will also include the development and management offices of the Titanic Quarter and banqueting suites and meeting room suites so that the citizens of Belfast can come out here and have key events and celebrations as part of Titanic Quarter's evolution. Diamond along the water's edge is an essential part of this, but it's part of a whole new strategy to create something unique. Some of you may have caught this article in The Guardian back in November of 2002. One of the most damning indictments about British planning law that homogenized the identity of towns all over the United Kingdom. You see, the effort here is to try to do something that builds on the ethos of Belfast and the Queen's Island shipyards to make Titanic a distinct experience as opposed to a repetitive experience. When we first came here 11 years ago, I met with some of the top property people in the UK, and they were keen to instruct me on the ways of developing property. So one of them stood up and said, "Look, Eric, sit down. This is all you need to know about property. Time and money. Doesn't have a lot of money and no money. Doesn't have a lot of time and no time. And all we care about are these folks up here." It was an inspirational moment. So of course, you know, being American, I had to get a little cheeky, so I said, "Oh, well, I kind of like these folks down here, people that have a lot of time and no money." "Oh my gosh." They said, "Well, those are vagrants, those are loiterers. What do you want to do with those people for?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I appreciate all that, but they're also the spouses. They're also the kids and the grandparents. And in a social group of friends, they're the eccentric friend." Right? And you all know that. You see, these people up here have more elegant, more honoring to do to those folks if they want to spend time. It's these folks, which we call, you know, the companions, the shopper or customer companions. They have more to say where this person spends time than the actual shopper or leisure or office worker does. And as a result, we know, for instance, that the average shopping trip in the UK is 45 minutes. But on every one of our projects, the average shopping trip is at least 3 hours and 30 minutes. The reason is if you build a place not for the individual, but for the social group of a family, a group of colleagues, or a group of friends, you change the dynamics of the community forever. And Titanic Quarter will build not just places for people to work, not just places for people to live as singles, but places for families and colleagues and friends to get together and spend time with each other. It is the mandate of the 21st century that is going to erase 100 years of planning conceit that has altered the cities of the Western world. There's a remarkable book, for those of you that enjoy such things, called Living It Up, which talks about the democratization of luxury. We live in a time where there has never been a higher percentage of an enlightened consumer group with more disposable time and more discretionary income than ever before. And they're all crying out for opportunities of where they can spend that time and spend that money together with their friends and families. And cities are not being built to accommodate that demand. We talk about honoring the diversity of people, the community of diversity, respecting tolerance, the diversity of faiths, of values, of nationalities, of ethnic groups. The greatest cities of the world that they're seen as were the ones that had the highest tolerance for secular values and the highest respect for diversity of faith. And Belfast has this opportunity. To give you an example of how this plays, we were asked by the New West End. Those of you that know the center of London will recognize this map. You see on here what we have is Regent Street, Oxford Street, and of course Bond Street. They said, do something to help clean this up, Eric. Well, the first thing we did was we got all the guidebooks to London. And there's not a single guidebook, of the 11 guidebooks in London, not a single guidebook recommends that you go to the New West End to spend any time. Because it's desolate there. It's just a shopping madhouse. So we said, you guys got it all wrong. It's not about the streets, it's about the neighborhoods. And what became the retail cluster groups or the neighborhoods of Marylebone, Charlotte Street, Soho, Carnaby Square, southern end of Regent Street, east and west Oxford Street, don't even know what each end is doing, and of course Bond and Albemarle on Berkeley Square. All these are about responding to treating these destinations as villages, not as shopping destinations. And so too, Titanic Quarter builds on this. We're talking about building a market center, a village center, that respects the diversity of the high street in the center of Belfast, but provides places for people to come instead to spend their leisure activity dining along the Lagan River, walking along its vantage points, and meeting and spending time with each other in the promenade through the parks itself. When you measure great cities, you do it two ways. You do it with the maturity of their citizens on the one axis, and the maturity of the city as itself on the other. And as you stack the uses of the city from food, retail, leisure, cultural, for lack of a better word, enlightenment, we know that citizens will spend an enormous amount of the resources to seek this somewhere else. But the great cities have all of these activities close at home. And Belfast and the Titanic Quarter offers an opportunity unlike any other city in the United Kingdom to tap on its deep authenticity of place, the ethos of 200 years of spectacular shipbuilding and a relationship with the sea, and to build a residential community here made up of a collection of villages that restores the safety and the sanctity of living in an urban environment on the water's edge. It converts to a simple cliche name, Cafe Society. And Belfast After Dark is already coming alive. And these images, which I took off your website, actually, off the Belfast website, you all know what's happening. People are spending time in the city afterwards. They wait and meet their friends at great restaurants and great pubs, in great places. The Lagan Side development is only the beginning of an astonishing change that is building for the first time a civic society in Northern Ireland. In 1998, in the Harvard Business Review, there was an amazing essay by Pine and Gilmore called Welcome to the Experience Economy. They talk about how cities evolve, going from commodities to manufactured goods, to delivery of services, to experiences. And this is precisely what Titanic Quarter offers. The shipbuilding legacy that we're part of today, sitting in the drawing office, is a profound legacy. Belfast's story is more than the story of one tragic ship. The affinity with the sea, through construction of ships, cargo vessels, luxury liners, warfare ships, scientific exploration, maintenance of these vessels, recreation and leisure is profound. In fact, it is so profound that only a few cities in Europe can lay claim to even a hint of that. Of course, we're going to dignify what happens with that particular ship. There's a magnificent memorial in Washington, D.C. that is probably the best tribute that I've ever seen to the Titanic. Built out of contributions from the women and children that survived the sinking, it honors the gallantry of the men who gave up their seats in the lifeboats to protect those who survived. And to build a similar sculpture like that at the end of the promenade that deals with the gallantry as opposed to the tragedy is the genius of what Belfast is about. We're talking about off the drawing offices here, and this is just a suggested diagram, it's not the solution, but building an iconic building visible from the slipways as you come up the Lagan River that will hold the Titanic signature experience that Michael Cunahan's team at the City Council has been working on for the past year. We have an application that we're working on going into the lottery to get government money to help build this facility, and we're going to need all of your help and support to achieve that. The slipways will be cleaned, opened up again as public spaces of hallowed ground. The drawing office that we're in today speaks to itself of the most incredible thing. And what once was a place where we created ships will now be a place where we create cities. And spaces in the drawing office will be set aside as a magnificent place to study the rich heritage, not just of the Titanic, but the diversity of what's happened on this land over the past 2 centuries. And of course, we're going to have the grand staircase rebuilt for of the Titanic, and the first class dining room. We have to have that, right? You have to be able to come here and experience that. Where else but Belfast, where the cabinetry work was actually done. Hamilton Dock will be converted to a centerpiece like Chesapeake, like Greenwich with the Cutty Sark. And we're expanding the museum to include the Belfast Maritime Experience. It'll include a richness of the diversity of innovation, invention, naval architecture, and engineering that Belfast at one point set the world alight with. You see, this transcontinental life that we all take for granted today was launched in Belfast. It's not just about the rivets. It's about the romance of traveling to distant lands, and more importantly, coming home. Titanic Quarter presents an opportunity to build one of the most integrated mixed-use residential, leisure, and employment centers anywhere in Europe. It has the highest quality of waterfront available of any port city anywhere that I know of in the continent. Belfast will reinvent itself and rediscover the ethos of its past. And although Pine and Gilmore talked about, marketplaces of commodities and manufactured goods and services and experience, I don't think they got it all right. Because with the likes of Belfast Institute of Further Education, an expanded agenda for health and community services, we can build first and foremost what every great city has always been about, and that is a marketplace of ideas. Thank you all very much for joining us today. We've got a little trailer now that you've seen the stage production. We got a little trailer to run, so I think if this works.